1152, the Middle Ages, and a young and beautiful woman, hitherto Queen of the Franks, has just married the Count of Anjou. 1199, during the siege of a castle, a defender shoulders his crossbow, and with one bolt slays a legendary king. 15 years later, in the midst of battle, loyal knights rush to save their king, thrown from his horse and surrounded by enemies. These three intimately connected events will lead to the emergence of one of the most powerful kingdoms the Western world has ever seen, the Kingdom of France. France, England, and Germany are three countries with clearly defined territories, with a strong identity, specific language, and customs. In general, an Englishman speaks English and lives in England. It has not always been so. Our story takes place in the 12th century, in the middle of the Middle Ages. This is the period of crusades, castles, and knights. Europe has lived through centuries of darkness. At the end of the Roman Empire, every town, village, or hamlet was isolated. One part of the population organized defense for the protection of all, so that others could farm in safety. Ramparts were thrown up. Pacts and alliances of mutual support were agreed. Chiefs were recognized. A new organization was established. Each leader became the vassal of a suzerain, and therefore under his authority. Each suzerain was himself the vassal of a more powerful suzerain, all the way up to the king at the top of the pyramid. The feudal system was born.
Welcome to the memory of humanity. Here we can control time, analyze and compare billions of events, and alter them to rewrite history endlessly. For example, let us imagine for a moment that our current democratic system was replaced by a feudal system, a country where we no longer spoke of a president, but of a suzerain. Power would be highly decentralized, granted to cities, departments, and regions. Each city would have its own law enforcement and local administration services. It could raise taxes. Certain sections of the population would work more than others, and a minority of people would own the majority of wealth. A game of alliances, pacts, and betrayals would be commonplace at the heart of power, as would corruption and embezzlement. There would be no national army. The population would not be able to choose its representatives, who would preciously guard power from one generation to another, from father to son. No elections, no consulting the people. The right to vote is what distinguishes democracy from feudalism.
Feudalism possesses an extremely strong and interlinked social fabric. It is difficult to destroy. However, this also makes it highly complex and difficult to shift. Through the mechanism of alliances, a father might well be forced to fight his own son on a field of battle. The period we are focused on is dominated by three realms: the Kingdom of England, the Holy Roman Empire, and the Kingdom of France. France is more of a mosaic of counties and duchies than a true country. Through alliances and marriages, kings must constantly seek to impose their authority over the feudal chessboard. In this complex game, there appears a queenly piece of irresistible power: Eleanor of Aquitaine. Wife of the King of the Franks, she is also heir to the Duchy of Aquitaine, one of the most powerful in the kingdom. However, the spouses do not see eye to eye, and their marriage is annulled. A young and beautiful woman of 30, incredibly rich and cultivated to boot, does not remain single for long. 6 weeks later, she finds a husband equal to her status, the heir to the throne of England. Through this union, Eleanor offers England a quarter of the territory of France. King of England, Duke of Normandy, and Count of Anjou, her husband also becomes Duke of Aquitaine. And equal to the King of France, he is also his vassal. Richer and more powerful, he nevertheless owes him obedience. The kings are in check.
Nothing is ever simple in medieval politics. In the 12th century, the notions of what is English or French are vague. Ever since it was invaded by William the Conqueror, Duke of Normandy, England has been ruled by Norman kings speaking Old French. The two kingdoms have become cousins. The nobles of each country hold fiefs in the other. However, William, on becoming King of England, did not renounce his title of Duke of Normandy, so he remains a vassal of the King of the Franks. And so, the famous Richard never called himself Lionheart, but Coeur de Lion. He did not speak English, but French. King Richard spent a mere 2 months in England and was also, through his titles, a vassal of the King of Franks. He was buried in France, his maternal land. The motto of the English monarchy, Dieu and mon droit, goes back to this period, as does the proliferation of words of French origin in the language of Shakespeare. English, the language of the people, will not be definitely adopted until the 15th century. On the battlefields of the Middle Ages, as on that of Waterloo, the Allies communicated between each other in French to fight the French. Powers are made and unmade.
In this particular context, it takes a strong man to ignite the gunpowder. In this period, there happens to be two. Philip Augustus, King of the Franks, a skillful politician and a fine strategist. Richard the Lionheart, King Knight and peerless tactician. Philip has a political vision that Richard is rendering impossible. To transform a collection of disparate counties and duchies into a true, unified kingdom, bound together under one flag. This resolutely modern vision of the state would make it the most powerful kingdom in Europe, and that is not what Richard wants. Through his mother, Eleanor of Aquitaine, Richard has legitimate claims on a part of the kingdom that Philip wants to create, and he is utterly determined to defend his lands. 1199, the Siege of Challis. Richard the Lionheart himself commands operations. Fired from the keep, a crossbow bolt strikes him full on. Richard pulls out the bolt himself, but within 10 days, gangrene carries him off. Our story has changed course. The balance is upset. The game is unlocked. John Lackland, Richard's brother, succeeds him and becomes King of England. He is also the son of Eleanor and can lay claim to the same rights over the lands of Aquitaine. However, he has neither the charisma nor the military skills of his elder brother. Now faced with a weakened opponent, Philip can finally create the France of his ambitions. One by one, he conquers the lands of the King of England. Alone, John can do nothing to prevent him. To defeat Philip, he needs Otto. Otto IV, Holy Roman Emperor, does not need to be asked twice. When one succeeds, it is often at the expense of another, and Philip has made as many enemies as friends. Two vast armies are raised. The invasion will be a combined encircling operation. In the west, John will land at La Rochelle to draw Philip away. In the northeast, Otto will seize the occasion for a rapid march on Paris. It's a trap. When he learns of John's landing, Philip Augustus orders the Oriflamme, the royal standard, to be raised, while he speeds to confront John. However, his instinct tells him to be cautious. John is not the sort of man to confront him in person, and he is now far from Paris. Too far. The north is without defense. He now holds the most crucial council of war of his reign. The survival of the kingdom turns on his decision. On the throw of a dice, he sends his son to confront John, while he himself will go to defend the north. Two armies, one led by the father, the other by the son, hold the fate of a realm. Neither of the two can fail. The first act is played out at the fortress of the Roche-aux-Moines. John besieges the fort, but resistance is so high that the relieving army has time to arrive. Seized with panic, and without even engaging in battle, John flees. The King of England will have a hard time explaining this lack of courage to his barons, which leaves Otto and his knights.
You are not born a knight. You become one. Equipped with armor and a charger, a knight is first and foremost a warrior, but a warrior who has adopted a code of conduct. Once recognized by another knight during the dubbing ceremony, he earns the right to wear his coat of arms, the sign of identification, and to fight with a sword, the most noble of weapons. Unlike a soldier who receives a pay or a mercenary who sells his service to the highest bidder, the knight pledges allegiance to a suzerain and swears to defend his cause and his honor. These elite warriors are the spearhead of medieval armies. In battle, men sometimes forge values that bind them together. From the samurai who observe the code of Bushido to the Semper Fidelis of the American Marine, by way of the grenadier of the Napoleonic Old Guard, the commitment goes beyond the field of battle and determines the lives of these warriors. Sometimes criticized and often labeled obsolete, this spirit has slowly been abandoned in favor of a colder, more pragmatic approach to war.
On July 27, 1214, the two armies are no more than a few miles from each other. The coalition army includes a large number of German pikemen in heavy armor. Otto IV can also count on a heavy cavalry made up of English and Flemish nobles, and also a few French traders. Redoubtable English archers and toughened mercenaries complete the numbers. The army of the Franks consists for a large part of elite cavalry, ardent knights from all four corners of the realm, well-equipped, veterans of the Crusades, and loyal to their king. Numerically inferior, Philip has turned to the free communes of the kingdom, who have dispatched considerable numbers of their own militias. After several days of maneuvering, Otto has engaged in the pursuit of the army of the Franks. Confident in his strategy, his objective is to catch up with it and destroy it. Suddenly, Philip's army turns about. While they imagine they would annihilate a band in flight, the Germans find themselves faced with an army of knights in battle order. In the center is Philip Augustus, the absolute enemy. This is the day. This is the hour. It is noon. The heat is oppressive. Somebody cries, "Death to the French!" and the battle commences. In the center, the German juggernaut, the terrible heavy pikemen, advance directly on the king of the Franks. The mission is to demolish the French ranks and kill the king as quickly as possible. The Franks struggle to contain the German monster. The town militias cannot withstand the assault. On the Germans' left flank, the Flemish nobles are engaged in ferocious hand-to-hand combat when, suddenly, above the clash of arms, the terrifying sounds of war trumpets rings out. The spearhead of the French cavalry charges furiously into the heart of the enemy troops. There's a mighty shock. The heavy cavalry sweeps all before it. Disorganized, the Flemish can do nothing against the Frankish knights who break through the ranks in several places, turn around, and attack from the rear. The whole of the German left flank soon collapses. To the west, the very opposite is about to happen. The Franks are within an inch of collapse. But then, the Bishop of Beauvais hurls his whole weight into the fray, hacks a path through to the English chief, and with a spectacular blow of his mace, shatters his helmet. Seized with panic, the English take flight. With their wings secure, the situation appears to swing in favor of the Franks. But in the center, the German foot soldiers are nearly within striking distance of King Philip. These 3,000 redoubtable elite soldiers have one single order: kill the king, whatever the cost. Exhausted, decimated, the militias finally give way. The Germans drive deep into the French ranks. The King's Guard charges to slow the advance. The situation is grave. Philip, at the heart of the battle, is rapidly surrounded by enemies and is under attack from all sides. His guard, far forward, is unaware of the danger. Suddenly, a spear hurtles through the air and strikes Philip full on. The king's armor deflects the blow and saves his life, but he is unable to pull out the spear. The German soldiers heave with all their might. Off balance, isolated, the king of the Franks is thrown to the ground. The Germans rush forward, their daggers at the ready. They must kill the king. Dazed, Philip tries to get to his feet to defend himself. His knights form a bulwark with their bodies and wage a desperate battle. The Germans are everywhere, and they outnumber them. Desperately, they wave the oriflamme to call for help. The king is about to die. The royal guard is hacking a path through to him, but is still far away. Laying down their lives, the last of the Frankish knights are true to their oaths. The Germans are too numerous. Maces smash through shields, swords pierce armor. Arriving just in time, the royal guard, in fury, slaughters the Germans and places the king back in his saddle. Philip Augustus is saved. He should take shelter, flee far from the battle, now. But a king is a knight. His honor commands him to remain and face the foe. The army reforms, swords unsheathed, shields raised. The Frankish knights, thirsty for revenge, charge the Emperor Otto. Opposite them, they can only prepare and wait. The German ranks fly apart. The knights charge upon Otto. Surrounded by a pack of furious hounds, he is now the one in danger. To save his life, he flees. The enraged Franks pursue him. Now it's the turn of the German knights to intervene. They narrowly manage to throw the Franks to the ground. Contrary to Philip Augustus, Otto deserts the battlefield in order to save his own life. 1199. Richard dies at the siege of Challis, whereas Philip Augustus survives the Battle of Bouvines in 1214.
We have just reached a turning point. A turning point is a key event, a crossroads in our history where the world swings one way or the other. Philip Augustus has just come within inches of death. If Otto's soldiers had succeeded in killing the king, their emperor would not only have won a battle, he would also have broken a kingdom. If King Philip had died at Bouvines, France, carved up into tiny duchies, would probably have been absorbed by a French-speaking England. For France, this was a unique opportunity to become a true kingdom. The right leader, the right moment, surrounded by good people. A very brief window open. Philip Augustus was able to see it, seize it, and defend it. With the king killed at Bouvines, the duchies and counties would have remained independent. France would never have come into existence. On a battlefield, the chief is the one who coordinates the efforts of all. He is the focal point, the keystone. A king, head of the army, but also of the country, cannot die or flee the fight without leaving his men to their own resources and demoralized. But during this period, a king is also a knight. If he wants to be chief, he must fight and be the first to do so. When he decides to go to war, he knows he may die, as may his sons. That is the difference. Let's now fast forward to the Napoleonic Wars. The Empire's marshals still fight at the head of their men, like Lannes, killed by a cannonball, or Oudinot with his 34 wounds. However, Napoleon stays in the rear. Forward even further to Verdun in 1916. 700,000 dead, 80% from artillery shelling. The generals are no longer at the front. The Second World War, Stalingrad. Stalin gives the order, not one step back. 1 million dead. The Soviet leader himself is hundreds of miles from the city. Truman is even further away when he gives the order to drop 2 atomic bombs on civilians. In our own times, an American comfortably seated in Texas uses a joystick and a real-time video link to pilot a Predator drone to strike down a target anywhere in the world.
A chief who flees a battlefield is never a good sign. Demoralized, the German troops abandon the fight one after another. Philip Augustus's victory is total. The two allied armies are defeated. In the heart of the battle, the king proved his valor. At the pinnacle of his glory and freed of his enemies, he has the means to impose his vision on his vassals. France will become progressively more important in the hearts of its people than their own duchies and counties. In the fields of Bouvines, the king of the Franks becomes the king of France. Other kingdoms will take the same road. The power of the barons will gradually decline in favor of the central power. However, a terrible evil lurks in the shadows of this dazzling victory, a time bomb. In becoming Queen of England, Eleanor of Aquitaine granted her son John and all his descendants legitimate claims to the lands conquered by Philip. Ironically, now thrown out of France, the English will rally around a unifying principle. They are English, and gradually they will turn to speaking English. The rivalry between the two countries will not end there, which all leads to the terrible 100 Years' War. But that is another story.
Who are we? Are you English because you speak English? Richard the Lionheart, King of England, spoke French. Are you German because you are born in Germany? Hitler, the German Chancellor, was born in Austria. What is a nation? Until the Middle Ages, the concept has no meaning. England, for instance, does not exist. It is simply a territory in which the English people live. They talk of the kingdom of the English and not of the kingdom of England. What is a French person? In the beginning, a Celt. Romanized, he becomes a Gallo-Roman and starts speaking Latin. Then come the Franks, but also the Burgundians, the Visigoths and other Germanic peoples who settle on the territory of present-day France, bringing their blood and their culture. France and a new language are born out of this mix. The French person today is the foreigner of yesterday. The idea of France as a nation was born in a stew of different cultures and languages, on a soil claimed by other kings. The idea germinated slowly and crept into the hearts of those who would defend it till death in 1914 with the cry, "For my country." Never before Bouvines would a Burgundian ever have imagined being anything other than a Burgundian. So what of Europe? In the beginning, just an idea. Nothing more than an idea born of the vision of a handful of men. But it is ideas that lead the world.